competition, so I'm going to go through this kind of fast and maybe touch on some new things that may be helpful. Again, my disclosures is I am an owner of a 100% physician-owned hospital and 100% ASC, physician-owned ASC. So I started back in the history, this wasn't just mine, but the outpatient, has really grown over the last decade, and there was a five-fold increase from 94 to 2006, and lumbar decompressions were the first to adopt, but then late in the 90s, as Kevin was talking about, we started doing those. I think I did my first outpatient ACDF in maybe 96. And then from 2010 to 12, there was a whole big influx of MIS lumbar fusions that were leading the market. And then we actually had our first 3-case series were published in 13 and 14. And from 2016 to 2018, there was only 6 retrospective cohort studies, so really a paucity of literature. However, it's really blown up, and from 2020 to date, you're now looking at 20 plus publications that are out there. I first started at an ASC in 2000 and started performing outpatient microdiscectomies and 1 and 2 level ACDFs back then. And but what eventually happened, in fact, when I started, it was malpractice to send somebody home and not put them in the ICU. The neurosurgeons like Kevin were looking at me like, well, not Kevin, but they really were. They were wanting to turn me into the board. That's how bad it was. We opened our physician-owned hospital, thankfully, because we found the window right before the ACA. And in 2008, and we sold our ASC because it was competitive at that time. But of course, what happens? You want to grow. 6001 doesn't allow you to grow. So 2 years ago, we opened up our SCE, and this is a state-of-the-art facility that we have. It has a EOS Edge, also has MRI, CT capabilities. And the point of that is that if you go into our ORs, you would not realize you weren't in a state-of-the-art our hospital. We built all of our ORs with laminar airflow and in wide hallways. I mean, it looks like a hospital. And if you're going to do these big procedures that are coming up, you really need that. And our SPD looks better than a lot of hospitals' SPDs because, again, you need to roll through stuff and make it safe. So I think that's a big thing. So obviously, we got to have carefully selected patients' health, psychological ability, and willingness, like we talked about. I mean, this is your good ASC fusion patient, and this one's not. And of course, unfortunately, the second patient is more what we see in Louisiana. We've done a few papers where we do, really the cross section of like fusions we do, and most of those papers, our average BMI is 33 or 34. So average. So of the people we're doing fusions on. So MIS techniques are important. They talked about that, efficiency and surgical skills. That's the other thing, is that how efficient you use a surgeon. There's some surgeons that are more efficient than others. I think that makes a difference. And perioperative protocols, your anesthesia techniques. We're going to talk more about ERAS in the next talk. In fact, I'll give a shout out. I see our fellow, Dr. Myers, and he actually is revamping all of our stuff and calling it opera. So you may be hearing about the opera in the coming times as we get this published. But why is there slow adoption? There's really been lack of literature, appropriate technology, appropriate techniques, your surgical team, and all these technologies that we're talking about. I think CMS coverage is something we need to talk about, and then third-party payer reimbursement. We talked about the literature. Obviously, that's growing. And then also MIS techniques are important, and we need to prove those out. But even open fusion, somebody said, I think Kevin said you don't see an open TLIF. Well, open TLIF can be done in an ASC, not a problem. Surgical team, I cannot tell you how important these guys are from pre-op to intra-op to post-op. They make this thing work. Pay them well and train them well. And then we have the ability to keep people overnight. That's a game changer because it does give you the ability to do these more complex cases and be able to keep them overnight, and that matters tremendously. Implant costs, they can be prohibitive, and that's really a problem. You got to work on the negotiating part, and that's probably something that we've done a great deal about. So if you want to do fusions, you really got to negotiate pricing with the vendors, and they got to really look at utilization ratios and rebates. There's some insurance companies, like our Aetna program has a GPO. So we have a great price with them, but they provide the implants. So we can use any implant we want. They're going to provide it. It doesn't hit our bottom line. So you got to work with them and see how that works. You can also do some direct OEM arrangements in some situations. The other things are potential OUS. Some of the studies, like the MODA study, was done OUS for its outpatient initial patients. CMS coverage is really the bane because they don't really have an ALIF or TLIF as part of their code. So you can't really do those, but you can do other patients. The other thing is this is really hospital driven because the hospitals don't want us to do it there, so they don't want them to have the codes. Prior to the Biden administration, those codes were released off the inpatient list, but as soon as Biden took office, within months, they were taken away. Hopefully we can get them back. The insurance companies, they really need to start working on helping us with these codes, and we need to get CMS to release these codes from the inpatient part of their ledger. And what's really important is how do you get this value proposition to the third-party payers that took us 9 months with Blue Cross, and it's an iterative process. It's difficult to get audience with the decision makers. You start here, until you finally get up to the people to make the decisions. But once you do and you show them that value proposition, they'll usually do it. And then you build trust. Like, for example, CMS only allows a one-level ACDF. They don't pay for the second and third level. And Blue Cross, the way they do it is they pay you a penny for the second and third level. So that's how they skinny you down, so you can't pay for the implants. Well, you got to work that in the negotiating process and build that up. So I think that's important once you get into that. So in conclusion, there really remains a lot of hurdles still to perform some of these larger procedures that I think are technical and financial. But there's really excellent support in the literature to allow us to do this. Patient selection is definitely the key. You really want to have these appropriate perioperative protocols and an exceptional team to make it work. Industry is going to have to play ball or risk getting shut out. There's lots of plays there. And CMS needs to change their coverage policies to the fusion. You need to negotiate with the third-party payers and the value proposition where it's a real win-win-win for everybody. But we're going to get there.